Imagine this. You've just finished a 10-year stretch in a Kazakhstan Bitcoin mine for what? For spitting on a holy silver icon of Borat the Pure. Fresh out of prison, you want to get your time back. You're ready to commit any crime imaginable. You put together a crew of old pals, and for a 20% kickback, you've got the transfer date and location of two priceless Big Vinnies. Yes, Vincent van Gogh's Sunflowers and Starry Night, thrown in for good rapping. All goes to plan. Big helicopter, big magnet, and the transport van is plucked from the intersection of West 53rd and 5th Avenue? Looping like hanging snot, the unwilling pilot drops your cargo in the open roof of a warehouse behind, the Bonefish Grill, along Lighting Way. Your chums have all gone to sleep, forever, and as you cross that last bridge over the Hackensack River into the Subaru no one knew about, you know you've made it. The priceless paintings, valued at nearly $500 million, are all yours. Set for life, right? No, wrong. You have nothing. David McMillan here with part 3 of How to Become a Master Criminal. Now, I'm not one of those, but I've made enough mistakes to know what one should look like. So, you've stolen 2 of the most valuable paintings in the world. You're now a top-level criminal, top of the game. How could it be that you have nothing? You should have understood the master criminal's first rule of crime. No matter how clever the scheme, no matter how ruthless the score, nothing has value unless it can be sold. More than that, sold to someone to whom you can connect and will pay the price, or close to it, rather than him pulling out a badge and calling for backup. Especially in the oil painting business, that's likely to happen. I can't really even keep track of the number of people, the number of times people have contacted me about some scheme or opportunity that contains the same fatal flaws. The goods to be stolen are numbered and tracked. It seems somehow that people overlook the record of everything. And the cost of the operation is high, the details complicated, and full of custom-made machinery to get into the vault, and which seems to need a crew of about 20 for the whole job. These daydreams have one unsolved problem. They always seem to come with one. Just one thing, David. And it's dismissed as somehow easily fixable. Such as, well, David, you'd have to get your alarm guy to bypass all of the sensors. My alarm guy? What, some magician who can overcome the logic of black and white? But look, here's a story. I'm sure I told you of a locksmith we used back in the day of cutting into heavy safes. Although we could drill through the faceplate of many safes, access to the safe itself was through 6 heavy doors with big security locks. Yes, we could have cut through the doors or drilled out the cylinders of the locks, but that was slow work. It was slow due to the sheer number of them, but also slow because drilling through the pins that hold the cylinder of the lock, even with the best drill bit, it has to be done slowly. Clean cuts mean you've got to be gentle in cutting through those. So, instead of using up all that time and increasing the risk, we'd pay a locksmith. He was in fact a young man we'd sent to locksmith school because he practiced every day, like the lock-picking lawyer, I guess, and took maybe 1 minute per door. He'd come on site and leave 10 minutes later, his job done. But that's another error. Who would be the alarm guy today? Now, keep this in mind. Most silent alarms work by sending a continuous signal through the air or by wire. That is, that signal's always there. It's not like something triggers it and a signal starts. Now, if that signal is interrupted, then the alarm trips. With a monitored alarm system, the goods can be safe in, a padlock garage with a single watchman. The alarm will seal the area. So all the tunnels and helicopters and getaway bikes mean nothing if that fatal flaw is simply dismissed. The electronics of alarms is understood, but overcoming them is usually a matter of actually damaging the main centre for the watch company. Yes, putting everybody out of action. Now, that's not... the watch companies and the police, they do react to everything going out. It puts everyone on alert, but often that's the only way. There is a multiple trigger thing. You keep setting it off, and they get sick of resetting it. But what they do then is kind of, depending on what the target would be, it could be surround the area or load the place up. It's not always what you want. Somebody just saying, oh, well, that doesn't work. We'll turn it off for the night. Not always. But that's not the point. I hate it when someone has some grand idea only to throw it back at me with a major problem. And I mean major sometimes. Hey, David, there is one thing. Listen, there's some gravity that's going against us here, but you've got people for that. You've got a gravity guy, haven't you? Yeah, sure I do. Imagine even robbing gold. That's as good as cash, no? Certainly easily convertible, or can be converted without a trail. Clean out Fort Knox? No, that's only for lightweights. Head back to New York City. What, District Diamonds? No. Nazi gold bars? They've long gone, been melted back. Instead, take some of the gold inside the New York Federal Reserve Bank. It holds 25% of the world's gold reserves. Much of the gold that's in there doesn't even belong to the US. There are around 640,000 gold bars as at 2021. Only 5% of that gold is the property of the United States. The rest belongs to other nations' central banks. It's part of their reserve, held safely, held to ransom sometimes, bargained with, lots of interesting things. But there's 48 foreign banks and 14 international organizations, at least, that use the vault to store their gold reserves. And by the way, one bar, that's about 12.5 kilos, or 400 troy ounces, we're still in a minefield of different weights, runs to about $720,000 per bar. That's good. But to take 10% of the stored gold there in that bank, I mean, you wouldn't just go in and take a few bars, would you? You'd feel like a complete dropped dipstick if you didn't take at least 10%. But to take that 10% would weigh in at 800 tons. Over 100 heavy trucks to move. I think such a convoy would be noticed, no? Another thing about selling the goods, especially those commodities when the stuff has a theoretical value, often touted as what it's worth on the street. It's a newspaper line and a police handout figure to pump up their hard work in seizing things, running around, lifting lids, seizing. Yeah. Anyway, $1 million street value of cocaine probably last sold in one transaction for no more than $50,000. Overvalued. And newcomers in the thing are overvalued too. But how do we put cold dollar values on the real returns? Well, it's obvious and overlooked at the same time in that naive criminal view. Just because it's illegal doesn't mean big rewards. You do the deal you can. Since the Berlin Wall crumbled and Eastern European basement jeans stitches flooded into the West, the competition has added not only low prices but low quality. They worked for crumbs before the wall came down and work just for crusts now. Most of the street corner home delivery Coke sold in the UK is, 10% South American Charlie, hammered with 90% ephedrine additives straight out of a government factory at the edges of Tirana, Albania. They have a good hold on the market, mostly by organisation and willingness to work for a little more than gambling money. You might have had Uncle Frank drive all the way from Malaga, Spain, with 60-70% pure level Coke through to London. But since you can't sell to the Albanians, who are you going to trade with? Sure, there's people, but it's their prices too. There's this crazy thing about, no, I'm paying top dollar for pure, whatever the fuck that is. Like buying virgins. Anyway, don't overrate your returns on what you think you're going to get out of it. On the other hand, if you're unique in a way, supply the one thing few can find, quality, and at 20% less than even that very special market demands. Why undercut when you've got the best? Here, because if you have the best and your buyer can make a living with a single meeting, you will never be ratted out. Lots of people will be. They'll even the most scurrilous deal maker with the cops around town, he'll rat out lots of people, but he won't rat you out because you're the golden goose, as he sees it. The value of souls is overrated too. A school chum came to me when I was at the top of my game in my early 20s. He knew a little about what I was doing. To him, I was loaded, operating, and not under investigation. Silent running. He wanted in, having wrestled with his conscience. Fine, welcome. But what can you do in my land? I asked. The positions of manager, creator, contact maker, money launderer, craft maker, document forger, and head of security were all taken by me. And there was only one job open, runner, the one he didn't want. He asked, running what? I told you it's better if I never say what, and best if you imagine the worst possible thing on earth. I say that to everybody. He declined then, but then returned to ask how much he'd get. So, conscience dealt with, we were now talking only of the price. I offered 4 times the customary fee, not just because he was a pest and an old school chum and all of that, but I did that to everyone who was a runner. It would be a luxury trip on the safe end, that is, west to west, the final leg, not the more dangerous exit from the source country to European entry. A new passport so he could walk out of the event once done. Wouldn't be part of his past. As well, a get-out-of-jail-free card. Yes, that option, if things go badly, I'll come and get him. I'd enjoy that most of all. Well, was Peter impressed and grateful? No, he was disappointed. He expected to become a millionaire for his one suitcase. Why? Why should he get a premium beyond all reality? He didn't say as much, but I knew why. He'd said, "But I'm not a criminal. Never done this before, and won't again. I'd never do this kind of thing." Peter thought his honesty, his civic-mindedness, his innocence was worth more than a few thousand paid to some low-life, ill-educated scum that usually did the job, as he saw it, and that I, as head of scum, should pay more for his goodness taken, his virginity, his purity. Of this I am sure because he didn't want to use the genuine but newly named and minted passport I wanted him to use, as though somehow God, fate, and the law might not realize he was a saint in need, a Jesus willing to go to the cross unless he kept his own name. He later came back to accept the rate, the fee, but circumstances had changed. A person who had been an obstacle to me had met with an accident, and I had all the tourists I might need. But I've always wondered at Peter's virtue, as he rated it. Why was his soul so much better than the criminal scum he imagined incorrectly that I would normally use? Not a very Christian view on his part. But that goes to another important issue, which I'll swim through in this series. Historically, crime was whatever the king or ruler said it was, and behaving like a king was certainly a crime if you tried to ape him. Thieves would be tortured or killed, but profitable large-scale crime was not distinguishable from governments of ancient times. Only in the last couple of 100 years has organised crime become hugely profitable as a separate industry. And that is because the organised criminals provided some illegal service. The bookmakers and the bootleggers of the early 20th century were service providers. For the most part, dull bookkeepers or distillers, and today poking keyboards for their backers, often extortionists or blackmailers. Not very exciting or challenging, somewhat grubby too. And the first challenge is to work with the available recruits. As an underground service industry, the ultimate challenge is to keep ahead of the forces of law, of course. Those who survive on the dark web need to constantly refresh their service platform or find themselves fatally targeted by agencies, often the FBI, which has sown the dark web as a minefield of Trojan traps. The transactions are in Bitcoin, as you know, a danger in itself. Exchanging Bitcoin for bankable and spendable money, it's a specialized skill, whatever anybody tells you, and that too deserves its own episode. Buying jewellery and watches from flash sales at overstock.com to then sell on Amazon while drinking Starbucks coffee is a slow way to safely extract Bitcoin value. So, where might an aspiring master criminal fit in a future where most crime brings low returns and inevitable prison stretches? Most, but not all. The answer is, as you might have guessed, within the machine itself. While narcotics has a solid path for those prepared to spend time ensuring at least the second layer of players is never arrested, you've got to protect them. Your contact list must be extraordinary. You have to filter out all the ones you don't want. Perhaps someone who has met thousands of people and understands their flaws. But that demands decades of experience. Alternatively, there's promise in servicing the service industry within the dark web. a new platform that can be used as though some dark Amazon with rated suppliers having fulfillment services validated by their encrypted trader codes. So you hang on to those ones. You guide them through it. And that's even as this platform branches out to become something else. It has to change in weeks, really. No longer Amazon, but Branco, Negro, Madeira, and Purus tributaries. Rivers to new platforms, but safe passage for your hidden traders. In fact, collapsing the trail upon the agencies who seek to trace the transactions to the top. If I were a dark trader, I'm sure I'd pay 10% for such a service. And there's a load of warnings in this, especially at the back end. You might breathe helium through a bison trail, but Coinbase payouts are readily traceable. Again, no matter what anybody tells you, so there's a new field to be sown there too. Now, if all that, bison trails and so on, means nothing to you, then perhaps walk tall, old school. Take the impossible missions. You know, I've long had an interest in Iran. The central bank particularly. No, not the cash, but something within. In this case, the collection of the crown jewels of Persia, once owned by the kings of Persia and the former Shah. They're now in the Bank Mazaki Iran, Central Bank of Iran in Tehran. The former Shah, Mohammad Reza Pahlavi, he was a modernizer. He was chased out by religious extremists. They remain in power today, the old bastards. He left for exile without the royal jewels, of course. Off to Egypt he went, though he would have preferred Paris, but they'd been courting Khomeini. So what were they to do? I mean, hypocrisy in governments, you've got to have at least, a few weeks break before you change sides. Anyway, to steal something from the vaults of a nation's central bank is a challenge. To steal anything big in Iran is a much greater challenge. It's quite a Sunday afternoon thought experiment. Yet, even if successful, the prize is not really the jewels themselves. For, despite interesting history, there are better gems to be found, such as this modern creation of a Russian Tsar's crown. To sell any of the Persian jewels, it would be difficult, not impossible, but never close to their real value, which is, in their history. Not the diamonds, emeralds, and rubies, many of which, if taken from their settings, would hardly match the quality of London's Bond Street. But the value is, what is it? I mean, it's having done it all, having pulled off the heist. To work out how to recruit the team, to face a certain and horrible death if caught, and the icing on the royal cake, to offend the current regime, which is as silly as one can find beyond North Korea. I'd really like to know just what you'd do with the Royal Jewels collection, if you managed to get away with them. Sell them to some of those fabulously wealthy expat Iranian property owners in London's Edgware Road or Kings Point in New York. I'll make a video of the best answers you give, of what you do with that royal treasure from the Shahs. What would I do? I'd lease an extraterritorial island from Kiribati. On stilts, I guess, the way the ocean's rising. They'll always need the money. Put up a hotel with a piano player and a little casino, and display the sparkling splendour in a glass case. Then see who comes a-callin'. Quite a guest list, I expect, if I was so open about it. Now, if you played it right, you might be able to free some political prisoners held for, I think it's about a 400 million ransom in Tehran. Some dispute over military equipment, planes, I think. They want their money back, and they've uncovered a little nest of British spies. Ha! And by no coincidence, it's Britain that has the 400 million. So you can see it needs something to nudge all that back into the dealing tables of the tiny casino on the tiny island of Tiny Kiribati. Even at worst, the last dinner you host with the Admiral of the Iranian fleet could be a meal to remember. Crime at its best. Yet, there is this in common with either path, the silent bookkeeper or the blatant robber. It's the intense concentration to detail and a complete understanding of human strengths and weaknesses, which is where we shall tread in the next episode. In part 2, I outline the dangers of the idiots in the crime world, but in part 4, the next one, I'll tell you what to do about them and how to build up a contact list. I had to join the circus when I first started on that one. The understanding of those around us is part mystery and part comedy. I'll join you then.